viewers, my name is Nothembekile Galata from the OR Tambo Inland District. Welcome to the Eastern Cape Department of Education broadcast studio. Today's lesson is about the geometry of 2D shapes. I will be covering this topic for your full understanding. Now, the purpose of this lesson is for us to describe, sort, name, and compare triangles according to their sides and angles. But in grade 7, our focus is on the equilateral triangles, isosceles triangles, and a right-angled triangle. We'll also be looking at the quadrilaterals. Even on the quadrilaterals, we look comparing them in terms of the length of sides, the parallel and perpendicular sides, as well as depending on the size of the angles. Now, what is geometry? Because we said we are looking at the geometry of 2D shapes. When we're looking around us, we see the different shapes, but these shapes have different sizes and they are different in terms of their properties. That is what geometry is about. But when we're looking at the geometry, we said we're talking of the flat shapes. We're talking of the flat shapes, but in the flat shapes, we have different number of them, which we call them the polygons. What is geometry? Geometry is the study of the shapes, but these shapes have different sizes and they have different properties. So whenever we're looking at the shapes, we must know we are dealing with the geometry. Now, in the 2D shapes, in the foundation phase, we totally referred them to flat shapes. But when we come to the InterCEN, we separate and differentiate between them. What we call the polygons. Now, when we're talking of the polygons, we are talking of the sides. We are looking at the sides the shape have, the angles that the shape have, and how are these sides related to each other. Okay. Now, for any polygon, it has three properties. It has the sides, as I've already said. It has the angles, and these angles are only formed when there are vertices or when there is a vertex. When these lines or when these sides meet, they form what is called an angle. Now, an angle is a distance between any two lines that intersect. Remember, we have talked about the different types of angles. So whenever you are looking at a polygon, you must be able to identify what type of angles have been formed. We've talked of the acute angles. We've talked of the obtuse angles. We've talked of the right angles and the other types of angles. But hence our focus is on the three triangles. I won't talk more about the others. Now, whenever we give a name to a polygon, these shapes are found all around us, but they differ in terms of the sizes and they differ in terms of their properties. So when you look around you, whatever you see that is having a shape, that one is a geometry. Now, we're talking of a 2D shapes. Now, in the foundation phase, we have talked about the flat shapes. But in this phase, we're talking of the 2D shapes as all the shapes that can be flat, but now this time they are enclosed by sides, which we call them the polygons. Now, a polygon, obvious, it will have three things or three properties that we are to look at it. It has the sides. How many sides does it have? It has angles. How many angles does it have? And obvious, it will have the vertices. Now, for the angle to be formed, those lines must intersect. then it will depend upon the type of angles that will be formed. They can either be acute angles, they can be right angles, or they can be obtuse angle. I won't talk much about the straight reflex and the revolution, because when we're talking about the 2D shapes, some of these angles won't be there. Now, a polygon will be given name according to the number of sides. How many sides does it have? Now, the polygons are differentiated between regular and irregular polygons. What are regular polygons, or when do we say this polygon is regular? It will be regular only if the sides are equal in length. All the sides are equal in length, and the angles are also equal. Therefore, that polygon will be referred as a regular polygon, irrespective of the number of sides it has. Now, when do we say a polygon is irregular? It is irregular. It is irregular because it is having none of the sides or the angles are equal. Now, what is a triangle? When do we say this one is a triangle? Remember, I said before, a triangle will have or is having 3 vertices, 3 sides, and 3 angles, whether they are acute or whatever type of an angle. The word triangle is made by 2 words, tri, which means 3, and angle, which means angle. So whenever you see 3 angles in a polygon, that one will be called a triangle. Now we have different types of triangles. We have an equilateral triangle, we have an isosceles triangle, and a scalene triangle. Now, these 3 triangles are named according to what is happening on their sides. We have given them names according to the sides. And we can also name the triangles according to the angles, which are called acute angles, obtuse angled, and a right angled triangle. So when you look at a triangle, be able to identify whether it has how many sides are equal or not, is there, and what type of angles has formed that shape or are in that triangle. Now, when we're talking of an equilateral triangle is a triangle that has all its sides equal. The 3 sides are equal. If a triangle does not have those sides being equal, then that triangle is not an equilateral triangle. When do we say a triangle is an isosceles? It is an isosceles triangle because only 2 of those 3 sides are equal. Therefore, it is an isosceles triangle. When do we say a triangle is a right-angled triangle? It is a right-angled triangle because it is having one angle, which is a right angle. Remember, a right angle is an angle that is 90 degrees in terms of measurement. If you measure that angle and becomes 90 degrees, then that triangle is a right-angled triangle. Now, I said in my introduction, we're gonna look at the 2D shapes. Which quadrilaterals are part of those 2D shapes? What makes quadrilaterals to be different from the triangles? Quadrilaterals are different because they have 4 sides, they have 4 vertices, and they have 4 angles. All the shapes that you see around you, as long as they have these characteristics, they are known as quadrilaterals, where the word quad means 4 and lateral means sides. Therefore, quadrilateral are all the polygons that have 4 sides. We have different types of quadrilaterals. We have a square, we have a rectangle, a rhombus, a parallelogram, kite, and a trapezium. Now, what is a square? Yes, it has the 4 sides. It is a quadrilateral, but it is a special quadrilateral. Polygons have 4 sides. They are different irrespective of that. They all have 4 sides. We have a square, we have a rectangle, we have a rhombus, we have a parallelogram, and we have kite and a trapezium. What makes each of these polygons different from the others? What makes a square to be different from the other polygons? Because they have the same common characteristics of having 4 sides, 4 vertices, and 4 angles. Now, if we are looking at a square is a special kind of a quadrilateral. Why is it special? Because it has all its sides being equal, which is the primary definition of a square. If all the sides are equal, then therefore that quadrilateral is a square. They are equal in length. They also have opposite sides which are equal. The other side opposite the other are equal. And the square is also having an angle which is a right angle. Remember, when we talked about the lines, 2 lines that intersect at an angle or forming an angle that is 90 degrees, we call those lines to be perpendicular. Therefore, it means the lines of a square are perpendicular to each other because they are forming that angle which is 90 degrees. Therefore, the opposite angles of a square are 90 degrees. That is, each angle is 90 degrees. What makes a square to be different from the other quadrilaterals? It is because a square is having all its sides being equal. That's why it is a special quadrilateral. All its sides are equal. Remember, we talked of regular polygons. If a triangle becomes a regular polygon, if all its sides are equal in length, therefore, one of the properties of the square is that all their sides are equal in length. Now, they are not only equal, they are also parallel to each other, the opposite side. Now, what do we mean by parallelism? Or when do lines become parallel? They become parallel if the distance from any point between 2 lines is the same throughout. Therefore, the opposite sides of a square are parallel to each other. Now, a square is also having lines or angles which form 90 degrees. Now, remember we talked of perpendicular lines. When are lines perpendicular? They are perpendicular only if the distance between them, they form an angle which is 90 degrees. Therefore, it means a square is having all its angles being 90 degrees, which is one of the properties of the square. Now, the other one is a rhombus. What makes a rhombus different from a square? A rhombus is having all its sides being equal. Therefore, it means it is having one of the properties of a square. What's different, or what's also the same, is that opposite sides are parallel to each other. This side is parallel to this one, and this one is parallel to the other one. That's what makes a rhombus different from that one, or the same. But what's different is that if you are looking at the angles of the rhombus, they are not 90 degrees. Therefore, these sides are not perpendicular to each other. In other words, it means we can say a rhombus, by the primary definition of a square, is a square, because a square is a polygon with all its sides being equal. Therefore, a rhombus is a square, but a square will never be a rhombus, because rhombus is having angles which are not 90 degrees. We have a rectangle as one of our quadrilaterals. The primary definition of a rectangle from the right plus the angle. It means a rectangle is a polygon which is having an angle which is 90 degrees. It means all the sides of the rectangle are perpendicular to one another. The adjacent sides are perpendicular to the other. So they form that 90 degrees. That's why it is called a rectangle. Now, the rectangle is having opposite sides which are equal and parallel to each other. This side is equal to that one, and this side is parallel to that one. This side is equal to the opposite side, and they are parallel to each other. And it also has the angles that are 90 degrees. It also has angles that are 90 degrees. Therefore, it means a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle will never be a square. The other parallelogram, the other quadrilateral is a parallelogram. Now, a parallelogram is a quadrilateral with opposite sides being equal and parallel. The opposite sides are equal and they are parallel to each other. Now, the opposite angles in a quadrilateral are equal in a parallelogram. But remember now, these opposite angles are not right angles. These opposite angles, if you can look at this parallelogram is made of two acute angles and two obtuse angles. Therefore, it means if we're saying a parallelogram is having opposite sides that are equal and parallel, it means a square is a parallelogram, a rectangle is also a parallelogram, and a rhombus is also a parallelogram. There are special kinds of parallelograms. We have the other one, which is a trapezium. Now, a trapezium is a quadrilateral which is having one pair of opposite sides being parallel and one pair of acute angles. Remember, an acute angle is an angle with a measurement that is less than 90 degrees. It is also having two angles that are obtuse angles. Now, an obtuse angle is an angle with a measurement that is greater than 90 degrees but less than 180 degrees. We have the last one, which is a kite. We know this one. We play around with it. Now, what is different about the kite is that the kite is having two adjacent sides that are equal, two pairs. What do we mean by adjacent sides? The sides become adjacent when they are intersecting at a certain vertex. These two sides are intersecting at this vertex. Therefore, this side is adjacent to this one. Even on this side, these longer sides of the kite are adjacent to each other because they are intersecting at that point. So we have these two pairs of sides being equal and adjacent. Therefore, the opposite angles are equal. Those are the properties of each of these quadrilaterals. In conclusion, we said the 2D shapes are differentiated into polygons and the other types. But now the polygons can be regular or they can become irregular. Amongst all the polygons we've talked about, the triangles and the quadrilaterals. Which of them are regular? Remember we said for polygons to be regular, they need to have all their sides equal. Therefore, if all their sides are equal, the angles also need to be equal. Therefore, in the types of polygons we've talked about, An equilateral triangle is a regular polygon. A square is a regular polygon. But when we come to irregular polygons, remember we said for a polygon to be irregular, the sides may not be equal, or the sides can be equal, but the angles not being equal. Therefore, a rhombus, though the sides are equal, because the angles are not all equal, it makes it an irregular. A rectangle is an irregular polygon because opposite sides are equal. Isosceles triangles, right angled triangles, trapezium, kite, and parallelogram are all irregular polygons. We have come to the end of our lesson. You can leave your questions on the comments. Don't forget to leave the name of your school so we give shout outs. Please share, recommend, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you for watching. See you on our next lesson.